The millionaire was lying helpless in the middle of a flooded roadside, his expensive suit soaked through, his luxury car crushed against a tree, and dozens of people were driving past him without stopping. Then a poor woman wearing a faded coat did something that would change both their lives forever. She ran into the freezing rain, dropped the small bag of groceries she had bought with almost her last few dollars, and knelt beside the stranger everyone else had decided was not their problem. She had no idea that the man she was trying to save had the power to change her entire future, and he had no idea that the woman holding his trembling hand was about to teach him the one lesson his fortune had never been able to buy. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to our channel so we can continue sharing stories that remind us there is still goodness in the world. Her name was Marlo Bennett, and at 34 years old, she had learned how to survive without expecting life to be gentle. She lived in a tiny rented apartment above an old bakery on the edge of a quiet American town, where the walls were thin, the heater worked only when it wanted to, and every dollar had a destination before it ever reached her hands. Marlo worked mornings cleaning offices and spent afternoons helping at a small community kitchen whenever she could. She had a daughter named Elsie, an 8-year-old girl with bright eyes, a crooked smile, and a remarkable ability to find beauty in things other people overlooked. Marlo's husband had died several years earlier after a sudden illness, leaving behind unpaid bills, a mountain of grief, and a child who still sometimes asked why her father could not come home. Marlo never had a good answer. She simply hugged Elsie tighter and told her that love did not disappear just because someone was no longer standing beside you. That belief was the quiet foundation of everything she did. That afternoon, the rain had arrived without warning. It came down in thick sheets, turning streets into shining rivers and forcing pedestrians beneath awnings. Marlo had spent most of the day working and was hurrying home with a small paper bag containing bread, soup, apples, and a little carton of milk for Elsie. She had counted her money twice before buying them. There was enough for dinner, but barely enough for anything else. As she walked along the roadside, she noticed a silver luxury sedan stopped at an awkward angle near a large tree. At first she assumed the driver had simply pulled over, but then she saw the shattered windshield and the driver's door hanging open. A man was lying several feet away, motionless except for the faint movement of his chest. Several vehicles slowed down. Some drivers stared. One person even lifted a phone to record the scene. But nobody stopped. Marlo did not think about the groceries. She did not think about the rain soaking through her shoes. She did not think about whether the man was rich or poor. She only thought about the fact that someone was hurt. She placed the grocery bag beneath the shelter of a nearby sign and ran toward him. The man was conscious but barely. His expensive coat was torn, his face was pale, and there was a deep cut near his temple. Marlo removed her scarf and pressed it gently against the wound. She kept him still and tried to keep him awake while using her phone to call emergency services. The man looked at her through half-closed eyes as though he could not understand why a stranger in worn clothes would risk getting soaked for him. The rain continued pounding against the pavement, but Marlo stayed beside him. She kept reassuring him that help was coming, even though her own hands were shaking. She noticed his breathing becoming weaker and immediately told the dispatcher exactly what she was seeing. She followed instructions carefully, never moving him unnecessarily, never panicking, never leaving his side. When the ambulance finally arrived, paramedics rushed toward them and took over. One of them asked Marlo whether she was family. She shook her head. Another asked whether she knew his name. Again, she shook her head. She simply said that she had found him and could not leave him alone. Before the paramedics loaded the injured man into the ambulance, he reached weakly toward Marlo and caught her hand for one brief second. His lips moved, but the rain and commotion swallowed whatever he was trying to say. Marlo returned to the grocery bag only to discover that the bottom had become soaked through. The bread was ruined, the apples were bruised, and the soup container had cracked. She stared at what remained and felt tears gather in her eyes. It was not the money that hurt most. It was knowing Elsie was waiting at home, expecting the simple dinner her mother had promised. Marlowe gathered the damaged groceries anyway and walked home through the rain. She told herself she would find a way. She always did. She had become so accustomed to making something out of almost nothing that she no longer allowed herself to imagine another kind of life. Across town, the injured man was being treated at the hospital. His name was Everett Calder, a 58-year-old businessman whose construction and real estate company had made him one of the wealthiest men in the region. His name appeared on buildings, charitable foundations, business magazines, and local news reports. He owned homes he rarely visited, cars he barely remembered buying, and a company employing hundreds of people. Yet none of those things mattered while he lay in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling. His assistant, Pierce Holloway, arrived shortly afterward, visibly shaken. Everett had been driving alone because he had dismissed his driver earlier that morning after an argument. He had been furious about a business decision and had insisted he could handle everything himself. Now he could barely lift his arm. When Pierce explained that a woman had saved Everett's life, Everett asked who she was. Pierce had no answer. The woman had left before anyone could get her name. But a paramedic remembered that she had been wearing a worn gray coat and carrying a paper grocery bag. The hospital staff had found no identification because Marlowe had not stayed to give them her information. Everett became strangely determined to find her. It was not merely gratitude. Something about the story disturbed him. He could not stop thinking about the fact that while dozens of people had passed him, one struggling woman had stopped without knowing who he was. The following morning, the rain had finally cleared. Sunlight spread across the town, revealing puddles sparkling along the sidewalks. Marlowe woke early and prepared a simple breakfast for Elsie. She had spent the previous evening stretching the little food she had left into enough for both of them. She packed Elsie's school lunch and walked her to the bus stop before heading toward the bakery where she occasionally helped in exchange for discounted bread. She expected another ordinary day of worrying about rent, groceries, and the overdue electricity bill. She had no idea that a black vehicle was already parked outside her building. A well-dressed man stepped out and asked the bakery owner whether he knew Marlowe Bennett. Within minutes, Marlowe was standing outside, confused and cautious. The man introduced himself as Pierce Holloway and explained that he worked for Everett Calder. Marlowe immediately became uncomfortable. She assumed there had been some misunderstanding and insisted she had only helped an injured stranger. Pierce told her that Everett wanted to thank her personally. Marlowe refused any money. She said she had not helped the man because she expected payment. Pierce told her that Everett understood that, which was precisely why he wanted to meet her. When Marlowe entered Everett's hospital room later that morning, she almost did not recognize the man from the roadside. He was sitting upright, still bruised but alert, wearing a simple hospital shirt instead of his expensive suit. Everett looked at her for several seconds before quietly thanking her. Marlowe told him there was nothing to thank her for. She said anyone should have stopped. Everett looked down because he knew that was not true. He admitted that he had spent his entire life believing people only approached him because they wanted something. His wealth had made him suspicious, impatient, and emotionally distant. Yet when he had been lying helpless in the rain, the one person who came to him was someone who had nothing to gain. Everett offered Marlowe money. She declined. He offered to replace everything she had lost in the accident. She declined again. Finally, he asked whether there was anything she actually needed. Marlowe hesitated. She did not want to tell a wealthy stranger about her financial problems, but Everett could see the conflict on her face. Eventually she admitted that she was struggling to keep her apartment and support Elsie. She explained that she was working whenever possible, but the bills kept growing faster than her income. Everett offered to help with the immediate expenses, but Marlowe still hesitated. She told him she did not want charity. She wanted an opportunity. Those words stayed with Everett long after she left. That afternoon, he asked Pierce to investigate whether Marlowe was qualified for administrative work. Pierce discovered that she had once completed several business courses at a community college but had stopped before graduating because of her husband's illness. She had experience organizing community programs, managing donations, coordinating volunteers, and handling accounts for the community kitchen. Everett realized that the woman he had assumed was simply struggling financially had abilities his company could actually use. He offered Marlowe a position in the community outreach division of his foundation. The salary was more than she had ever earned, but the job came with responsibilities. Everett made it clear that she had not been hired because she saved him. She had been hired because she had demonstrated courage, organization, compassion, and integrity. Marlowe accepted the position on one condition: she wanted the foundation to do more than write checks to organizations. She wanted it to create programs that help struggling families regain independence. Everett agreed, but the real transformation began when Marlowe started working there. She discovered that Everett's foundation had enormous resources but little personal connection to the people it claimed to serve. Marlowe began visiting shelters, food banks, schools, and community centers. She listened to people instead of simply reviewing reports. She discovered that many families did not need someone to rescue them forever. They needed childcare, job training, transportation, temporary housing, or someone willing to believe they could rebuild. At first Everett resisted her ideas. He was used to making decisions quickly and measuring success in numbers. Marlowe challenged him to measure success differently. She showed him families who had received help years earlier and were now helping others. She reminded him that dignity was not something money could purchase. Slowly, Everett began changing. He visited the community kitchen for the first time. He sat with elderly people whose rent had increased beyond what they could afford. He met parents choosing between medicine and groceries. He listened to people who were embarrassed by needing help. For the first time in decades, he stopped looking at poverty as a statistic and started seeing individual human beings. But Everett's transformation was not easy. His adult son, Grant, strongly opposed Marlowe's influence. Grant believed his father was being manipulated and accused Marlowe of using the accident to gain access to the family's wealth. Everett initially defended her, but the accusations created tension within the company. Then an internal audit revealed that several foundation funds had been mismanaged before Marlowe arrived. Grant attempted to blame her because she had recently become involved in the foundation's operations. Marlowe was devastated. She considered resigning rather than allowing Everett's family to believe she had betrayed them. But instead of quietly walking away, she requested a complete independent investigation. The audit uncovered that the missing funds had been diverted by a senior executive who had been working closely with Grant. Marlowe's records and insistence on transparency were what exposed the fraud. Grant was forced to confront the truth: the woman he had distrusted had actually protected his father's foundation from becoming a shell for corruption. Everett was heartbroken when he learned how badly his own company had been compromised. He apologized to Marlowe for allowing his fear and family tensions to make her question whether she belonged there. Marlowe accepted his apology, but she also told him something he never forgot. She said forgiveness did not mean pretending nothing had happened. It meant deciding that what happened would not control what came next. Those words changed Everett more deeply than any business lesson ever had. He finally understood that wealth had made him good at controlling circumstances but terrible at accepting vulnerability. He had spent years building walls around himself because he feared losing what he had. Yet the accident had shown him that a person could possess everything and still be completely helpless, while someone with almost nothing could possess the courage to give everything. Months passed. Marlowe completed her unfinished college degree with Everett's encouragement, but she never stopped working with struggling families. The foundation eventually launched a program providing temporary housing, job training, childcare assistance, and emergency transportation for low-income parents. Marlowe became its director, but she continued to visit the community kitchen every week. She insisted that success should never make her forget where she started. Everett changed too. He sold several properties he rarely used and redirected the money into affordable housing. He began having lunch with employees instead of eating alone in his office. He repaired relationships he had neglected for years. Most importantly, he rebuilt his relationship with Grant. The betrayal was painful, and forgiveness took time, but Everett refused to let anger destroy another family relationship. Grant eventually accepted responsibility, left the company for a period, and later returned after rebuilding his career honestly. Their relationship never became perfect, but it became genuine. One bright morning nearly a year after the accident, Everett and Marlo stood outside a newly renovated community center. Children were playing in a safe courtyard while parents attended job training sessions inside. Elsie stood beside her mother holding a small ribbon from the opening ceremony. Everett watched the children laughing and realized that the greatest return on his wealth had never been a building, a company, or an investment. It was the sight of people who had once felt forgotten finally believing that tomorrow could be different. Marlo looked at the center and remembered the soaked grocery bag she had carried through the rain that day. She remembered thinking that she had lost almost everything she had bought for dinner. She could never have imagined that the ruined groceries would become the beginning of a new life. But she also understood something even more important. Her life had not changed because a millionaire decided to reward her. Her life had changed because she had refused to walk past someone who was hurting. Everett had not become a better man because he became richer. He became a better man because he finally understood that kindness was not weakness, generosity was not charity, and asking for forgiveness was not defeat. Before they left the center, Everett handed Marlo a small wooden frame containing a photograph from the foundation's first day. It showed volunteers serving meals to families beneath a bright morning sky. Behind them was a simple sign bearing the words, "No one should have to face the storm alone." Marlo smiled through tears. Everett told her that those words had become the foundation's new promise, but Marlo knew the promise had started much earlier, on a flooded roadside when a woman with almost nothing decided that another person's life was worth stopping for. If this story touched your heart, please leave a meaningful comment telling us what you believe the greatest lesson is: kindness, forgiveness, courage, or second chances. And if you know someone who is struggling today, share this story with them so they remember that one difficult season does not have to define an entire life. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can open a door we never knew existed. Sometimes the person we help becomes the person who helps us find ourselves. And sometimes, after the hardest rain, life does not simply return to normal. It begins again.